After that, the second image for the second pie chart that we created is also inserted with the same statement, pdf.image, and the name of the picture, pie_chart.png, and then specifying the x position, the y position, the width and the height of the photo. And then the third picture is the bar graph, which again we're placing at x5, y is 150, width is 90, and height is 60. And then finally, we're outputting the PDF using this or under this name called file1.pdf. And now if you run this program, you're going to be getting the results that you see here on the right side, which is where it puts the title MarsCode coding. And then it puts the three different graphs that we created, which is the line graph, the pie chart, and finally the bar graph. So that's pretty much what it does if you decide to merge the FPDF and the Matplotlib library, which is where you basically have the graphs that you created are now going to be placed on the PDF document. Madrasa bin Yusuf College in Marrakesh, Morocco. The next thing we're going to be looking at in this tutorial video is the methods and list slicing, because these methods and list slicing techniques we are going to be using in the programs that we're going to be creating for this tutorial video. The first one is upper, and that's a method. So this method, what it does is that it checks all the characters in the string that you enter or users enter and sees if all those characters are in uppercase. So that means it's going to return true if all the characters are in uppercase, otherwise it will return false. The second method we're looking at is lower, and what that one does is check if all the characters in a string are in lowercase, and if all the characters are in lowercase, it returns true, otherwise it returns false. The third method we're looking at is digit, and what it does is that it checks if all the characters in a string are digits, it returns true, otherwise it returns false. The fourth method is append, and this one goes very well with lists. It's a method for the lists. Whenever you create a list and you want to add something to the list, then you're going to use .append. It basically just adds an item to the list. List slicing itself is a technique that you use to display certain parts or all items of a list, which we're going to see. Now here's a sample code to better analyze how we can apply these methods and the list slicing technique. On line 69, you can see that we've created three different variables, which is called count1, and we set that equal to 0, count2 equals 0, and count3 equals 0. On line 72, we're creating a list called password. And so we're writing pass_word equals to empty square brackets, which means we're creating a list. On line 73, we're asking the user to enter their password. And then on line 74, we're basically checking through the password using those methods that we've just seen. So in all senses, you can say that this program that we're looking at is basically a password checker, which checks to see if the password the user is entering is valid or not. So we're using a for loop, as we've already learned what a for loop does in our previous tutorial video. And what we're using the for loop here to do is just to go through every single character that they've entered in the password and check if any character is at least an uppercase or at least a lowercase or is a digit, because those are the basic requirements necessary to make a password valid. So we're using that for P in password. You can say for anything. The P just basically goes through every single letter and represents every single letter in the password. And then we're using if statements to check if P is upper. That means is it in uppercase? It's checking each single character in the password. If it's in uppercase and if it is in uppercase, it's going to return true, which is why we're saying if P dot is upper equal true, because it will return true, then we'll do count plus equal 1, which basically means count 1 equals count 1 plus 1. So you're adding plus 1 every time a character in the password is detected to be in uppercase. Similarly, or should I say on the contrary, we're doing the same thing, but this time with lowercase. We have P dot is lower equal true. So what we're doing is checking that every character in the password, if a lowercase is detected, it's going to add plus 1 and it's going to save it under count 2. And so that's why you see count2 plus equal 1, because it's going to be count2 equals to count2 plus 1. And then the third one, or the third conditional statement we have on line 79 and 80. On line 79, we're saying if the p.isDigit equal true, that means if numbers are detected in the password instead, anytime a number is detected, then count3 is going to be adding 1, which is why we have count3 plus equal 1. Finally, on lines 81, 82, what we've done is after doing that check to see if the characters are in uppercase, lowercase, or there's a digit, we use this if statement to basically check if the count 1 is greater than 1, count 2 is greater than 1, and count 3 is greater than 1. Because if there's at least an uppercase and at least a lowercase and at least a digit, then that would indicate password is valid. Mind you that we're not counting like the length of the password, because that's another thing that needs to be present for a password to be fully valid. We're not including that here because we want to mostly focus on the methods and list slicing technique. So hence I've omitted the part where you have to actually check the length of the password, making sure it's at least 8, and then at most, of course, longer. But anyways, if the count 1 is greater than 1 and count 2 is greater than 1 and count 3 is greater than 1, it's going to print password is valid, else it will print password is invalid. And now that is just how we can apply those methods that we've just learned about. But what about the case of a list slicing technique? Now you can see on line 85 and 86, I am using a for loop again on line 85 to go through all the characters in the password again. So I'm saying for add in password, and then I'm appending those characters, or those the characters that we get inside of the password, I'm appending them to the list that we created called pass_word. And so you can see that we're making use of the append method now to basically add every single character in that list separately when it goes through all the characters in the password using the for loop. And then we are printing on line 87 on the right side here. You can see after we've gone through every single character in the password and we've added that to the list using append, we're now printing some extra information for the user. And this extra information is we're printing all the letters in the password by using the list slicing technique, which is where you put 2 columns, as you can see in the parenthesis, the square parenthesis in front of the name of that list that you created, which is pass_word. So it prints all the information there. So that's how the list slicing works. It's a simple example. If you put 2 dots, it means you're just printing every single thing in a list. And the second thing we did on line 90 was we also showed them, we're also showing here how we can be able to display just the first letter in the password, and that's just by writing the name of the list and then just putting 0, because all things start at 0 for the compiler. So the first letter in the password would be at a 0 position. And then on line 91, the middle letter of the password. So you have to first check the length of the password, divide it by 2. So you know the number that will be the index position of that middle letter of the password entered. And then finally, on line 92, we're printing the last letter of the password. And if you want to print the last things in a list, and that's why we're coming back to list slicing, you'd have to just say the name of the list and then -1. That means the last thing in the list. And if you say -2, the second last thing in the list, and so on. So all of this is just printed as some extra information to further explain how the list slicing technique also works. Here's the output of the program when it's run. As you can see, the password that's entered is MarsCode 24 is fun. So in this password, there's the presence of an uppercase or uppercase letters, lowercase letters, and numbers. And once this password is entered, it does say it's valid because it does contain those 3 counts. Remember the count 1, count 2, and count 3 that we're adding 1 anytime it detected an uppercase, a lowercase, or a digit. So if all those counts were greater than 1, then password is valid, which is why it's saying password is valid. Otherwise, it will say false. And the extra information, as we've seen here, as you can see, is that all the letters in your password are, and it basically displays all the letters MarsCode from MarsCode, and then 24 separately, and then is fun separately as well. So the list slicing that we saw, where you put the two columns to display the start of the list and the end of the list, just displays the entire thing for you. We also see that it displays the first letter of the password because we did write the name of the list, and then in square brackets we put 0, the index position of the first letter, which is M, and then the middle letter of the password, which is where we just found the length of the password and divided it by 2 and got that value, which was basically the index position of the password, of the middle part of the password. In this case, it is E. And the last letter of the password, we used list slicing again, and we used -1 to indicate the last letter, which is N, obviously. And if we did -2, it would have printed U, or -3 would have printed F. So you get the drill of how it's basically going to print if you'd applied a different list slicing technique. So that's how these methods and list slicing technique works. Learning to code is useful no matter what your career ambitions are. Ariana Huffington. File handling, text files, part 1. This is another important topic that we're going to be needing to know for this tutorial video because we're going to be applying it in our program as well. File handling just basically means creating text files and then writing data to them as well. Kind of similar to how the PDF library works. The only difference with text files is that you can't put images in them, unlike PDF files where you can actually put images.